In Romans 8:18, the Apostle Paul writes something pretty amazing. He says this, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. What Paul says here is basically that the things that we suffer in this life, as difficult and hard as they are, well, they cannot even compare to the greatness of what God holds for us in heaven. Now, I want to be clear that in saying this, Paul is not trying to minimize the suffering that people experience in this world in any way. In fact, Paul himself was a person who suffered a great deal, more than most of us ever will. So that's not something that Paul would do. What Paul is trying to do here is to speak to us a really important truth. And that truth is that we have a hope beyond this life of something that will not just make up for our suffering here, but will outweigh it by an infinite amount. How is that? Well, there's a couple of things to say. First, in heaven, it says in the scripture that there will be no more tears and no more suffering. The Bible tells us that all sin and sadness and evil and struggle will be wiped away, and we will live in this utterly joyful state with God. In fact, Jesus says that heaven is kind of like a big party. So the quality of our existence in heaven is better than the quality of our life here. And so our life in heaven outweighs our life and our struggles here in that way. In terms of the quality, it's just going to be better. The second thing is that we will live with God in heaven for eternity, forever. So whatever injustice or suffering we experience here against the backdrop of eternity is really just a blip on the radar screen. Its importance fades against that backdrop of eternity. So the length of or the quantity of our existence in heaven also outweighs this life and our sufferings in this world. So heaven is better. It outweighs this life and all of our sufferings, both in quality and in quantity. And that is just an amazing promise for us. But there's also a really important piece of justice that's wrapped up in all of this, because we all know that life in this world can be terribly unfair. Some people are born into awful circumstances, to awful situations. Some suffer terrible things. Some have lives that are cut short. And if God is real and the hope of heaven is real, there is something more. There is something better. There's justice, there's fairness, there's consolation for what they did not get in this life and for what they suffered in this life. But life is a lot less fair if there is no God and no hope of heaven beyond this life, because those who are dealt a bad hand, there's nothing more for them. They are born, their life is hard, they maybe die soon, and that's it. It's profoundly unfair. Sometimes when people experience hard times, they stop believing. But to stop believing in the face of tragedy is to miss or to forget this important point that we have the hope of something more, of something better beyond this life that far outweighs all of our suffering. And knowing that truth not only reminds us of this hope that we have, a hope that can give us the strength to get through the struggles that we face, but it also reminds us of the God who has given us this hope because of his great love for us.